did a couple of videos last week about the metaphor of climbing and elevation and verticality in relation to development and in relation to kind of spirituality, I suppose, and why it is that we associate the rising with all sorts of positive developmental processes, including what might loosely be called spiritual processes, but also things like educational processes and anything that improves. And what I was saying there is that it's perhaps taken its logic from the logic of embodied experience, climbing up a hill, and the relief that comes with surging the crest of a hill and having your heartbeat come back to normal, and being in a light, brightly lit space and being able to see the vista spreading out before you, and feeling safe because you can see any potential attackers, and a whole series of positives that emerge from that. Along with, and there's a number of other metaphors, of course, that key into that. Metaphors of growing, metaphors of accumulation. There's a whole series, I think, which I'll perhaps talk about another time. But I'm also thinking about the opposite, which is about going down. Because going down is almost always thought of as negative, unless it's in a sexual context, in which going down is often thought of as a good thing. But generally, going down is a bad thing. If you are depressed, if you are low, if you're in a downward spiral of depression, for example, if your psychology is repressed, or if your immune system is depressed, all these things are using exactly the same metaphor. It's all to do with this kind of vertical, an imaginary vertical line with different points on it, assign different values. And the further up you go, the better, and the further down you go, in this case, the worse you get, really. Lots of negatives associated with down. But then some advantages, though. Well, actually, no, there's very few advantages. But there are some correlates, I think, of that experience. I mean, certainly down, just to play the opposite card to that rising I was talking about. Certainly going down is a move away from the light towards the darkness. I mean, they're quite literal terms. If you look up, it's all this brightness in your eyes. As you move your head down, less light falls upon you, and the further down you get, the more in shade you are, that kind of thing. So I think there is a really well-established conflated experience. That's how they tend to be referred to. This experience, conflated experience between elevation and illumination. And so down is associated with the dark. It's also associated with dirt underground, for obvious reasons, I hope. It's also associated with weight and heaviness. And I think when you are depressed, there's probably all kinds of physiological reasons why you might feel heavy. But I think it's also built into the metaphor of the downward motion. There's a kind of gravitational pull to the down, which implies weight and implies that kind of motion, and a kind of inertia that weight brings with it. So if you're down and you're depressed, it's very hard to move. You become more solid, and again, I think that increasing weight, increasing inertia, increasing solidity is also part of it. Things that are heavy and solid tend, like rocks, tend to be down on the ground, whereas things that are more vaporous and volatile, well, they might float for a start. They might float on the surface of a liquid, but they might also float in the air if they're light enough. So there's this kind of strange substantive experience as well, which I think provides a kind of logic to our own feelings of being down. When we are down, we become like the earth, or become like a rock on the earth, or become like something that's fixed into the earth. And a lot of our experience maps itself from that verticality. And also, I think getting out of that, getting out of a depression is hard. I think many people. I know I've had a little bit of that in the past, not for a long time, thank God. but it is hard to get out of, and I think that's built into the logic of the figuration, the image of this falling and downness. It's just built into the logic of that, because it is, standing up is harder than falling down. Slipping down is easier than getting up. Getting up requires effort. Climbing out of a pit requires effort. And of course, once you're in a pit, you're likely to have less effort to start with. So it's doubly difficult. Yeah. And there is some slightly interesting. I'm just kind of making this up, but it is there is some interesting research to support this. I was reading in Scientific American, I think it was not either last month or the month before, this really simple piece of research about people responding positively to questions. And this is such a simple little thing, but what these people had to do whilst they would, I've not got this quite right, but it's something like this. Whilst they were responding to questions, they had to do this little exercise with their fingers, just moving things up or moving them down or moving them around in directions, like an abacus, that kind of thing, where you can move things. And the people who were given the task of moving things up, just sliding things up a board, responded more positively to the questions than people who either moved them downwards or moved them in random directions. Just that action of a metaphorical action, just animating that metaphor of motion in an upward direction was enough to just put a little bit of positive spin on how they were approaching these questions. I mean, that's really tentative evidence for what I'm saying, but I think I could probably find evidence elsewhere for it. Yeah. And of course we say cheer up, don't we? Cheer up. When you're down, you need to cheer up. Actually, personally, I hate hearing people say cheer up when I'm unhappy for any reason. In fact, I hate people trying to make me happy when I'm not. My wife tells me I'm very unsympathetic, because I assume that most people don't really like being sympathised with. And I'm probably wrong in that. Many people probably do like sympathy, but I personally don't. I find it a burden, personally. I always think, oh God, now this person's having to commit some of their emotional, cognitive resources to my unhappiness. That's something else I've got to fucking think about. When I'd much rather be just getting on with it, really. But that's just me, you know what I mean? And I accept many other people would probably welcome a friendly word or something. But that's not my thing at all. Personally, I try to look at it like the weather. I don't try and do anything to get over it. I try to change the metaphor. You know what I mean? Because get over it, it's another one, isn't it? You're down, you've got to get over something. Anyway, personally, I try to change the metaphor to a weather metaphor. I try not to conceptualize myself as being down, and there being some kind of up position I have to get to. So if I do that, I know I'll never make it, because I won't have the strength when I'm down there to climb out of this pit of despond, or to, do that Yaz thing, the only way is up. None of that stuff is available to me when I'm down. So I have to change the metaphor, and I adopt a weather metaphor, and I kind of assume that there's a lot of, I'm locked into a complex system. It's a biochemical system, it's an ecological system, it's systems of physics and chemistry and all this kind of stuff around me, and psychology and sociology. All these systems are looping through me, and my body chemistry is intimately linked into all those systems. And just like any complex system, it has these patterns and these strange chaotic vortices running through it. And if it happens out there in the atmosphere, we call it weather. So I just think of myself as a bit of a weather system, really. And the world is kind of swirling through me. The world, including other people and jobs and dogs and social situations and psychologies, but also all the inanimate stuff of the world. All this stuff is in flow, it's all blowing around. And some of it blows through my biochemistry and through the biochemistry of my emotional state. And sometimes the weather is fair, and sometimes the weather is foul. And when it's foul, I just kind of hunker down for a few days and wait for the storm to pass. Don't think it'll work for everybody, but that's what I do. I'll just show you guys a new muzzle. Look, this is Guy.